This changes everything for the Bruins, as multiple reports coming out from today's press conference about this offseason coming from Cam Neely have changed the thought process behind this Boston Bruins team. We're going to be touching on that, as well as going over a lot of moves which had been made yesterday, thankfully worked out in the Bruins' favor. We're going to be also talking about what that means for the Bruins heading into not just this season, but as early as the first few games of this year here in this video. Before we do jump into it though, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make sure you hit the sub button. Join me here on the channel. We're covering everything Boston Bruins here, and you will not want to miss it. Daily videos coming out about this team now, as we are only days away from Boston Bruins regular season hockey, and many surprises are set to make from this team here in this year. And I'm going to be covering it all for you right here on the channel. But we need to jump straight into this because, I mean, heading into today, we had a lot of questions surrounding what the waiver priority would have been for the Bruins, surrounding if they were to be claiming anybody, but more importantly, if their players would have gotten through unclaimed. And thankfully, that was the case. As you see from Puckpedia here today, the only waiver claims from the group of players that were here yesterday were Caden Primo, Sammy Blais, Colton Ellis, and Curtis Douglas from Toronto, Buffalo, and Tampa. Now, this means that we do see Matej Blumel and Michael DiPietro get through to the Providence Bruins in a very surprising move, as we fully did expect those two, or at least one of them in Michael DiPietro, to be claimed. And Toronto here, I'll say it right now, made a major mistake on their behalf, but helped us out quite a bit by keeping Michael DiPietro in the organization over Caden Primo, which is, definitely an interesting idea behind this. But going into this, of course, is an absolutely huge move for this Bruins team. Two players who were borderline making this team now going through waivers, staying in the organization until they get recalled, which could be very, very soon in the case of Matej Blumel. And also with things now potentially looking up in a very interesting direction, the goaltending side of things, we may also see Michael DiPietro here very soon. But I wanted to jump into some quotes here from a few other players, and a few of those in a moment here from not just the case of Don Sweeney, but talking about Matej Blumel and Michael DiPietro, but also what we spoke of from Mark Allred here yesterday, and he was spot on. Spitballing here, but maybe the 31 other teams in the NHL pass on waiver claims for goaltender Michael DiPietro due to the fact that he's got a 2-year one-way contract that he agreed to recently. So shout out Mark. I mean, you were spot on this. Absolutely fantastic here, kind of calling this out, and hopefully that was the case. And if not, this had to be at least some factor for some teams. Whether it was all 31, hard to say. But going into it, of course, you see a guy like Caden Primo get claimed over Michael DiPietro. You have to think that there was something to do with the contract here, which made the favor in the Bruins side, and it worked out perfectly. So shout out Mark, because you were spot on here. But going into this as well, as I mentioned, Ty Anderson tweeted these out, going on from Marco Sturm and Don Sweeney, talking about the guys that they did lose to, the AHL. Not on waivers, but they did get through, so obviously a good thing. But Marco Sturm said this on waiving Michael DiPietro instead of keeping 3 goalies. We know Mikey's an excellent goalie. We don't want to lose him, but the other 2 guys were great. And of course, luckily, they didn't lose him. Very good start, kind of mindset there from the Bruins, making all these other teams think that they wouldn't claim him. But they go to show how much Mikey has been a big factor for this team, not just so far in this preseason and training camp, but also the past couple of years. And with Providence, he's been a goalie that certainly has had his chances to come up to the NHL. Brandon Busty did take a few of those for backup opportunities, but Michael DiPietro has been getting better and better over the past few seasons, as I'm sure you guys know, and as I've been talking about here over the summer, which was a big topic of conversation, especially with Joonas Korpisalo, the kind of mindset that he had going into last year, where he did say that, I wanted more playing time. He certainly deserved it, but, Swayman, whatever happened there, we're not going to talk too much about that, because we know we're on a different mindset here now with Jeremy Swayman. There's thoughts that Michael DiPietro would have been the backup, but it's only a matter of time until I think we do end up seeing that at this point right now. Whether or not Korpisalo would get traded, I think they like him here. I think they have him as a trustworthy backup who's a veteran in the NHL that can hop in any opportunity and play good hockey. And we saw as well, like I mentioned, when we did acquire him with the LA Kings, he was very, very good for that stretch of, I believe it was 18 games or something along the lines of that. So I think that's what the Bruins are hoping to get out of Joonas Korpisalo over Michael DiPietro, at least for the time being. Now, going on with that as well, Marco Sturm was asked about what Matej Blumel, what did he not do enough to make the team? He included Alex Steves in this answer as well, and he said, I thought in the games 3 and 4, they loosened up, but they probably didn't bring enough scoring to make the team. Now, this is not something I think is going to be a permanent factor. And as we mentioned, Matej Blumel has been a big piece of this team since we've already acquired him in the offseason. With his ability in the AHL, from what we've seen from him already, he's a guy that at any point throughout this season will be a top candidate to be called up. And that goes not just for him, but that also goes for Matt Poitras. That also goes for some of the other players that got sent down who will be at this point where they will make an appearance here at some point in this season. But for now, they want to see what he can do in the AHL, and if we see him exceed in the AHL as we have in years prior, there may be some moves that can kind of be made to get Matej Blumel into the NHL. Like they said, they like what they saw, but it just wasn't enough right now. And I think having Matt Poitras and Pavel Zacha in the organization, some fellow countrymen for him, will kind of be that extra motivator to get him back up to the NHL level and stay here, as we thought he was going to, at least early on in training camp and preseason. So we now know the reason that both of those guys were sent down. I think that this is something, as I mentioned, that is going to be tentative. It will be kind of going by probably a week-by-week thing to see what the status of these players is. More so Matej Blumel over Michael DiPietro, knowing that they're not going to call him up just to have 3 goalies here, as they would have to send him down their waivers once again. So it is something to keep an eye on going forward and how things are really going to work out on this instance of the roster. Now, before we jump into those Cam Neely quotes, I do have one more thing as a positive coming out from this, and what Don Sweeney was saying about Fraser Minten, as the new acquisition has already made the team and made waves for this Bruins organization. He said this, Don Sweeney on Fraser Minten's preseason performance, keeping him on the Bruins roster to start the season. A couple of guys were right on the doorstep. Fraser took, to his credit, took the opportunity, and he earned it. So it is a bit of a conflicting thing here, whether or not they thought Fraser Minten was on the doorstep, because I really don't think so. I think that he has really, at every step of the preseason and training camp, has shown that he is set to make this team, and doing so, of course, got that spot, earned that spot for the first game of the season, and we're going to see where he does end up on the lineup. I think there's a lot of opportunities for him to stay in this lineup, but even move up throughout the rankings, even possibly onto the second line throughout this season. I assume he will start probably on the 3rd or 4th, but going up to the 2nd, I don't think is going to be a crazy feat for him after what we've seen and kind of the energy he's been playing with so far. But that's just what Don Sweeney had to say on Fraser Minten. But we know this roster was probably not what we expected here going from the offseason to now, with what we thought Don Sweeney was going to do. And Cam Neely came up with some very interesting quotes about all of this. I had to say this: we're going to have to play a tight defense if we're going to be one of the 8 in the playoffs. We tried to bolster our offense in the offseason, and it didn't come to fruition. So this is almost kind of calling out the players they did add, not necessarily going back through last trade deadline, but more so going into this offseason, where they did acquire, of course, Mikey Eissaman, Tanner Jeannot, Sean Corrali, a few players who at this point right now seem to be more depth, more kind of energy to bring this team rather than the actual goal scoring that they do need. And going on with that and continuing on with the goal scoring idea, Cam Neely did continue. He said, we do recognize we may have a little trouble scoring some goals, but I think defensively we can certainly play much better. Obviously, McAvoy and Hampus are healthy, and they're going to be a big part of our back. I think we're going to be very tough out this year, and we're expecting to play very hard every game. And I mean, I don't think he really needed to say this about the defense. I think we all know we're going to be a very good defensive team at this point right now, likely more so than offensive in this season, especially when we have our defense kind of locked up since, beginning of last season. But the way that he came out with this really kind of just said, hey, we don't have much offense. I think it's genuinely crazy, especially when you have a guy like Matej Blumel, who you just sent down, is a very good goal scorer, but may just not be ready yet. If you're looking for the goal scoring, you need it the way that Cam Neely is describing it, you would have had him on the roster. But I think, like I said, it's kind of a matter of time now until we do see at least him come up, maybe a few other of these young players come up, and over the next couple of years, it's something that we're going to see quite an influx of, is younger players who are very quick and also good at goal scoring. So although we are a defensive team, I think it's kind of just a weird thing for Cam Neely to come out and say at this point, and kind of bringing down the energy of the offense, at least in my mind. That's what it seems like the reaction of the players would be to this. So it's weird. And I want to know what you guys think about that, or if I'm just kind of being crazy thinking about this, because, Cam Neely definitely not the best guy to come out and quote stuff like this. We've seen it over the past with the whole Jeremy Swayman situation with the contract, and that was on another level, but this is something that kind of reminisces of that for the offense. So let me know what you think about that. But we do have a few more things before we do finish the video off, and one from Elliot Freeman on 32 Thoughts of the Podcast. He has the Bruins as his gutsy pick to make the playoffs. He says, the reason I am taking Boston is I don't know how much they're going to score, but they're going to defend a lot better. And I kind of, as Cam Neely just said, that is a factor. That is going to be kind of the game plan, and I feel like everybody knew that. But as Elliot Friedman did and put it here, it makes a lot more sense when you're putting it in this direction. They're probably not going to be the craziest on offense, but the players we did add, definitely good defenders on forward. Defense is healthy. We do have the goal scoring capabilities, but, not as much as this team would like to have going forward. So, take this as you will with what we're seeing from Cam Neely and how these kind of coincide. But Elliot Friedman right here is kind of going in my mindset, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure if you guys have been watching the videos the last little while, I think this Bruins team is going to make the playoffs. I feel quite confident in that. And like I said, whether or not it's going to be offense, and like we've seen from these two right here, Friedman and Cam Neely, whether or not it is offense or defense, you need both to win games, and you need your goaltending to be on. And from what we've seen so far, it does seem like Jeremy Swayman and also the defense seem pretty locked. So let me know what you think about that as well. But one more thing before we do finish the video off, I want to say a massive congratulations to Zdeno Chara, who on January 15th, 2026, will become the 13th number in Bruins history to be retired. And this is awesome. Of course, we saw how much he means to this team. We know it. We know the history. We love the history. It's been a long time since he has played, but feels like every day we can remember what he's done for this organization. So once again, a big congratulations to him here, who's getting that number retired on January 15th. And you never know, I may be in the arena then watching that game. We're going to have a look at that and see how things do play out. But this is awesome. Obviously, having him now joining the organization once again as a role for player development, player kind of morale boosting. Great things to see. Now having that kind of just the cherry on top for his very, very kind of early start to his coaching and kind of staff career, but also the end of the 2025 year heading into the early 2026. So awesome stuff to see there. But I want to know what you guys think about everything that we had in this video here in the comments below. I think it's a lot of crazy stuff coming out around the Bruins now, as we're only days away from the beginning of the season. But there's a lot more coming out. You won't want to miss it. And like I said, daily videos coming out about the Bruins. You won't want to miss it. We're going to have it all right here on the channel. But that's all I got here in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. I'm signing out though. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.